document everything as you go. That's my number one advice, because as you're starting, it'll get away from you very quickly if you don't document as you go. But if you also document as you go, you're showing the start of your maturity. You're showing that you have something in place already. So when you do get those assessments, you can say, yes, I have something in place. It may not be perfect, but we have a starting point and I can show it to you. Also, create a roadmap, a 3 to 5 year strategic plan for how you want to build and mature your program so that you know stepping up what you can pull in year over year. So you start with your critical suppliers, your critical customers, and then you expand from that point on and showing when and where you're going to pull in different types of suppliers. So you might focus on technical suppliers at first for your critical base, and then expand from there to be IT hardware or whatever it is, whatever's most risky or needs to be used for operations for your organization. That's how you spread out.
1, 2, 3, 4. All right, folks, let's get started. Don't be shy to ask questions here. I'm going to definitely make sure that we have enough time at the end here for Ashley and Falicia to go through the questions, as many as we can. Falicia, thanks for joining us. This is like one of the hottest topics that we have from our customers. They're almost majority of them, I'd say, are struggling today with some form of third-party vendor assessments and compliance and so on. And we're trying to figure out, help them understand how to navigate it all. To start off with, I think it would be really beneficial to understand your role at Iron Mountain. If you can explain it a little bit more. I don't want you to tell me your whole career and where you started in high school, but like just tell us today, like what does it look like today that you do day to day? I think that'd be really interesting and paint the picture so that you can help everybody here today.
Yes, and thank you for having me here today. So right now, I manage our global third-party assessment program for Iron Mountain. So that's really the assessment arm of the life cycle of managing third parties. So what we do is we set the frameworks for how we assess our suppliers, and then we set the guidance for what kind of documents would meet those requirements as well. And then we perform those assessments. So we look at the documents, we address any and identify any gaps, and then report that out to the business so they can make informed decisions.
And sorry, keep going. I cut you off.
Sure, no problem at all. And then behind all of that is the overall support for the organization as far as meeting certifications and regulation requirements and customer requirements as well, which is where you all get into having to answer all of those assessments that come in.
Right. We're going to dive deeper. So how big is a team? Like Iron Mountain's a very large company. How many people would be on your team doing those third-party vendor assessments?
It is a large organization, and honestly, I didn't think of my team as a large team until you pointed that out a few days ago. But yes, we are a larger team as far as it's concerned, as third-party risk is concerned. So we have a global seated team of 7 team members that report up to me, and so it's 7 analysts that sit all around the globe.
Wow, that's a good size. See, I think one of the things I really wanted people to understand is that in cybersecurity and compliance and all these different areas, there's so many different paths for careers, and this is really another one that's pretty exciting. All right, so let's just start. I want to paint a picture for you and tell you a little bit about what some of our customers are seeing. So many of them could be a small to mid-sized business, as an example. Imagine a 300-person company, right? And next thing you know, either the sales rep of the company, maybe the CEO, all of a sudden receives like a cybersecurity questionnaire from their top customer. Sometimes it happens when the customer's already engaged and they're already working together. Sometimes it happens like at the PO stage. So imagine they just sold like the biggest deal ever and they signed everything. And next thing you know, this team comes in and sends them a cybersecurity questionnaire and says, fill this out. We need to know what your cybersecurity looks like. The first question I have for you is, an organization like yours, how are you determining which vendors are going to be getting that cybersecurity assessment? What's the process look like? Why are you selecting those vendors?
Sure. So, that process, when you're on that sales team, that really just takes the wind out of your sails when you receive that really big assessment, right? So when we're doing an assessment, what we're really looking for when it comes to cybersecurity is what kind of data. So it really comes into the data and the connections that we have with that particular engagement. And so how are they supporting the company or the organization as a whole? How are they connecting to us? What kind of data are they going to have? What kind of connections are they going to have? And once we know that and the type of information that they will have too, because that's really what it comes into, we need to know the connections, the type, and all of the details of that data. Once you know what types of data you're dealing with, so if it's digital, you're going to have to go that path, right? There's some kind of method of digitally managing that. So you're going to need to have some kind of information security structure, some kind of IT structure behind it. And that's where cybersecurity really comes in. You need to be able to answer those questions on how you're encrypting things, how your password strengths are, and get into those details. So it's really on the suppliers that have access to data and really sensitive data. Public data doesn't really matter that much, but when you get into the more sensitive types of data.
So like an organization like yours, you're going to have thousands of vendors, maybe more. How do you determine and rank them? There's 7 people on the team, which is a lot, but how do you determine like these groups of vendors we're going to assess first, these groups we're going to go next? Like, how is that criteria put together? Is there software you use, or is there a methodology around that?
We have a methodology that we built within ourselves. So if it is anything that is absolutely critical for our organization, keeping our operations going, and then we're looking at our customers. Who are our top customers and what are their requirements? And what are the connections that are supporting them, right? So if we have a supplier that's connecting with them and supporting them as far as their data and information security or anything that's processing data for them, we have to look into those as well. So we prioritize based off of criticality when it really comes down to it.
And there's software systems that do that stuff, right? Like you can put in specific criteria and it provides you that. When you send an assessment to a vendor, how do you go about that process, if you don't mind sharing? Like, some of our customers will get an Excel spreadsheet that maybe is mapped to a specific cybersecurity framework, and it's sort of like, hey, fill this out and answer these questions. Other times they're getting links to maybe software portals that, like a GRC platform or compliance platform, that they have to go in and answer questions and so on. What have you seen in the industry? Maybe not even necessarily what you folks are doing, but what are the methods and why are they selected as options?
It really depends on the maturity of the organization, what kind of questionnaire you're going to get. But as a whole, we all generally kind of fall back on the trust but verify stance. So what we do as an organization is we're trying to collect independent attestations and certifications wherever we can, because that's really a third party coming in and showing us that they've tested your controls and they're asserting that those controls are in place. But what you'll see a lot of times, due to resource constraints and just program maturity, is those Excel sheets or those links to an assessment that's online on some kind of platform. Most of those are based off of a very standard set of questions that are out there, that are information gathering and cover many, many risk domains. So if you were to see across the line, you'll probably see a lot of those questions are very similar, if not the same, across all of those different assessments.
Right. And so what I'm hearing from you is that you're looking at all your vendors, you're sort of scoring and ranking them in regards to who you're going to do assessments on and to what level. Probably depending on what they're doing and what your customers' needs are, you're going to have a different level of assessment that you're going to provide or review them on. Is that correct? Yeah.
Correct.
And so, like, if they have access to your networks, they need to connect to your data in some way, shape, or form. That's a different level, a different assessment, and they're going to be scored differently or looked at differently. And that's exactly what your team is doing on a daily basis.
Correct. So we utilize a tool that helps score them automatically for us, and that's really the inherent risk score. We're looking at what is the scoring of just going in and doing business with that supplier without knowing what their controls are.
Okay.
And so that's really what drives the next stages. So we're asking those questions as far as what goes into what we call our inherent risk profile. So those are components of it. We're asking those network questions, those data questions. It's not the full view of what we're asking, but those are the components that we do ask, that touch on in this space at least.
Right. And for your business, you guys are under a lot of regulations based on what you're doing. So this is a key part of it and one of the key reasons why you're doing that, right?
Correct.
Right. So tell me, what happens if you send a questionnaire to a vendor and it comes back and you're like, wow, the cybersecurity posture on this company is really poor. What do you do?
We ask a lot of questions. So if we get a response back, we're going to follow up. We're probably going to set up a call with you and just really have a conversation because we want to know where you sit as far as your maturity, what you have in place now. And that's what we find a lot is people are afraid to state what their current maturity is. And understandably so, because you don't want to get slapped on the wrist. You don't want to have somebody coming in and telling you you have to completely fix your whole system, right?
Right.
But there also needs to be some kind of transparency between the two parties to know what the maturity is and where there needs to be growth. So that helps from both perspectives. That helps the supplier not only grow and mature on their end, but it helps us know as the customer what controls we need to put in on our side to help protect ourselves as well. So the transparency really, really helps. So when that happens, we're going to have that conversation with the supplier. We're going to go in and ask more questions. We're going to say, that doesn't make sense that you have nothing in place. Do you at least have a policy? Can you show me the policy? Great. That's a starting point. Now let's discuss where this goes, the more specifics about the details, how you manage this.
Yeah, my experience is a lot of companies just aren't used to it. They don't know what to do when they get them, or even understand what the expectations are. I think it's great that you guys have a conversation with them. I can see, people being pretty nervous, and there's cyber insurance providers who today will send you an assessment and then after and be like, you don't pass the test and we're not going to insure you. So it's good that I think that you're having a conversation. So I think that helps for people, not to get too nervous when they receive that. And we can talk a little bit more about that in a second. I have a question for you. So one of the things a vendor should not do is lie, right? Like they shouldn't fill it all in, say, yeah, I have all this stuff, and like flip it. Or what's the risk associated with that? You said that is sort of a trust but verify, I guess, approach, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, from my perspective, I'm going to come in and look at your assessment materials. And if it's just a questionnaire, that's really just we're trusting you, but now I'm going to have to go back in and validate what you stated. So I'm going to start asking for documents if you didn't send it to me ahead of time. If you can't send me those documents, I'm noting the gaps. And that's what's going to be discussed with the business to help them ultimately decide whether you're a sound enough supplier to move forward with or not. So while we don't make the decision, we help inform the decisions. And that's really important to know because we need to be able to understand the engagement and the controls that the supplier has in place to be able to help inform the business so they can make the right decision.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So it definitely sounds like, for sure, that large companies, large enterprise organizations similar to yours, I'm not saying you guys would do this as a path, but maybe you were kind of hinting on it, are selecting your vendors based on their cybersecurity posture.
It's certainly a component of the selection process because you need to know that they can at least meet your minimum standards, right? Because if you have a framework and you require your suppliers to meet at least those minimum framework requirements in order to meet your regulatory requirements, your customer requirements, then they have to meet those minimum standards. And then you can work to mature with them. But if they don't meet those minimum standards, why are you doing business?
Right. How do you manage that inside of your business? Because it's so huge, and you have people who are purchasing software and purchasing vendors, and I'm sure you have a procurement team who's buying those things. Do you engage with them regularly and educate them on, hey, if you're going to pick a vendor, they need to understand they're going to have to go through a cybersecurity assessment? What's that look
Yes,
like? Yeah.
education is the name of the game on a daily basis.
I
A
bet.
lot of communication, a lot of education, and it's an ongoing thing. This has been something that it takes a lot of work. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. When you're trying to get the business to understand what third party risk management basically means and what it means to them, it takes a lot of relationship management and coaching and education. But once they get it, they really understand it, and then they will support your program wholeheartedly because they're like, absolutely, you're helping me reduce the risk to my business so that I can just do more, because at the end of the day, those sales guys are like, I need to sell, 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 but
Right.
they can only sell, sell, sell if you can support them from the back end and say, yes, we can meet all of those requirements for our
Yeah,
customers.
totally makes sense. Okay, so imagine it's a company. Maybe one of these people are on this webinar right now, and they received their first cybersecurity assessment. So their favorite customer or their new customer, they just signed a PO with them. It's the record-breaking sale, and they get this first cybersecurity assessment. What do you have any tips for them? Where do they start? Where do they go if they've never done one of these before and are trying to figure things out?
So I would highly recommend reaching right out to your assessor and just setting up a call with them, getting to know them, getting to know their perspective and where they're coming from, and having an open conversation with them saying, okay, I'm looking at this. I don't necessarily agree that some of these apply to me, maybe, and having those conversations. Why does it apply to you? Maybe they don't understand the engagement wholeheartedly either. And so you're helping clear the air so that everybody comes to a final understanding of what is open and what the actual controls are. So it's really important to just have that conversation. Don't be afraid to reach out to them, because they'll be able to help guide you and tell you, okay, you know what, this is really what I'm looking for. I know it says this, but we can accept this instead.
Yeah, so hearing you from your side, which is really interesting, you want it to be successful. The vendor's been selected, or they're in that process near the end, because you're not going to waste time with a vendor unless they're sort of in that final stage or have already committed to becoming the vendor. So it's a partnership. You want to make it successful. You want to continue the relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so pick up the phone, send an email, set up some time, and have a chat with them, and be pretty open about, hey, I don't necessarily agree. We're not doing that type of work for you folks. Just want to make sure we're on the same page. And the assessor might be like, oh, I didn't quite recognize that. I thought that we had that kind of relationship, and that might adjust the level of assessment at that point in time. That's what you're saying.
Correct.
That's great.
I mean, I'm not saying spill all the beans, but share what you can so that there's an understanding of what the relationship actually is.
Right. Get on a good start. So I know a lot of people probably get really nervous when they get that assessment. It lands on their desk. They're probably freaking out. I don't even want to respond to this. I don't even know where to start. And I think you're painting a good picture of that. It's a partnership, and that you can start to have a conversation about it and get it to the next level. Okay.
Well, it can be very overwhelming to receive. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, when you get 120 control framework assessment with all that stuff on it, for sure. So what can a small to mid-sized company do who have never gone through this process before? What can they do to help prepare themselves? Like if they've never gotten one before and they're on this webinar and they're thinking, all right, how can I get more prepared for this? What are the steps that they can take?
How do I get started, right?
Yeah, how to get started.
Where do I because I'm just looking at this pile of suppliers, where do I even go? It's really, you need to look at a couple of things. You need to look at what your supplier base is, what your critical suppliers are for your organization. Really start there and get an understanding of what those are and what kind of risks are associated with those types of suppliers, right? You need to create your own framework, your own path for your program. So develop a strong and smart base. So really forward thinking in your design on all the questions that you're asking, so that you can understand what the engagement actually is. So you need to look in multiple components. For us, we look at information security and physical security and business continuity and insurance components. And we're looking at applications that they're connected to. And there's just privacy impacts. There's just so many different things that you need to look into, but you need to start somewhere, right? So start with your base, know all of the different risks that are associated with that type, and then you'll know what you need to answer to, what you need to build to. So document everything as you go. That's my number one advice, because as you're starting, it'll get away from you very quickly if you don't document as you go. But if you also document as you go, you're showing the start of your maturity. You're showing that you have something in place already. So when you do get those assessments, you can say, yes, I have something in place. It may not be perfect, but we have a starting point, and I can show it to you.
That's great. Did you have something else to add there?
Yes, I would add also create a roadmap, a 3 to 5 year strategic plan for how you want to build and mature your program, so that you know, stepping up, what you can pull in year over year. So you start with your critical suppliers, your critical customers, and then you expand from that point on, and showing when and where you're going to pull in different types of suppliers. So you might focus on technical suppliers at first for your critical base, and then expand from there to be like IT hardware, whatever it is, whatever's most risky or needs to be used for operations for your organization. That's how you spread out.
Oh, I got you. Okay, so you're talking about both sides of it. So first one is to prepare for if a customer comes to you with an assessment, get your program started, build a roadmap, start to document everything that you've done so that when you get that cybersecurity assessment, you can answer it really quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you were sharing a little bit more around like flipping it to the other side, which is like, how do you prepare for if you want to do an assessment on your own customers, right? Is that the other part that you were talking about?
So that was really just preparing your own program to be ready to answer to your customer questionnaires and your regulators questionnaires.
Okay,
You
I've
need to
got you.
have all of those in place. Preparing yourself to answer the questionnaires, that you need to have those documents in place. But you also need to work with all of the subject matter experts within your organization. I would go to them with those specific functional areas and say, privacy, can you help me answer to this? Because you may not be able to answer all of those questions. You need to really utilize your SMEs in those spaces. So I would get a master key of your most stringent assessment out there. I would bring everybody to the table and have them answer it and get a master response and utilize that as your key to answer all of the assessments from that point on.
Ah, I see. Okay, so you're saying like find a framework and start to work towards that, whatever that framework
Yes,
that you've
yes,
selected, and start at
correct.
least trying to piece the pieces together so that you can respond if it comes around. I think
Correct. Select a framework. Yes, exactly. And then that first customer questionnaire that comes in is probably going to be your most stringent one. So base it off of that, and then from there, you can usually use it to answer the other questions that come from other customers down the line.
Yeah, I think it's important that, and I've seen a bunch of these different assessments. I think it's really important that people understand that it's not always just cybersecurity technology. You touched on like physical security, which is a key part of cybersecurity or any type of security. If someone can gain access to the facility and get access to computers and networks, it puts, as an example, your organization at risk or other organizations at risk. So physical security is so key. But there's other sides too. You mentioned privacy. Not
Mhm.
Smaller organizations aren't necessarily going to have a privacy attorney or even their general counsel have that skill sets, but there are privacy attorneys that you can hire to help take you through that process as well, and they can be a resource for you to reach out to because the assessments are going to also have privacy questions inside of them asking, right? Am I right? You guys would have that in there too? Yeah.
They're absolutely in there. Hmm.
Okay, let's flip. Okay, now I want to flip the script a little bit. So one of the key control questions for in these one of the key control questions in a lot of assessments is, are you performing third-party vendor assessments on your own vendors, right? So we've got this sort of supply chain path that's going. You're asking your vendors that question, and then they are supposed to say, yes, I am doing that. And then they're supposed to go down the line and ask their vendors and kind of go through that same process. Now, most organizations don't have a team like you awesome people. They don't have 7 experts on staff. So, how could they get started doing, if they wanted to start doing some vendor assessments themselves? Any tips for them there?
So you're looking for tips on how to get started conducting vendor assessments?
Yeah, so imagine you sent to one of your vendors an assessment. I'm sure that one of the questions that you have on your assessment is, are you performing
Mhm.
shaking your head all right? Are you performing third-party vendor assessments on your vendors? Any tips for them on how to go about and do that? Maybe you don't need to name the software, but is it software or is it a questionnaire?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So really, it kind of goes back to getting started with identifying, right? So you can do this with Excel spreadsheets. Is it perfect? No. But you do need to start somewhere. So you need to have an idea of your enterprise risk tolerance, and then from there you can build the questions. If you know what is acceptable for your organization, then you can say, okay, these are the types of questions I need to start asking. If they're really at risk adverse, then you're probably going to want to ask a lot more questions.
Right.
You also need to know what's risk for your industry, right? So, are you predominantly an industry that provides like boxes and things like that? There's not a whole lot of risk involved in the communications and things that you have. So maybe it doesn't necessarily make sense that you have this huge, robust program and you're doing a deep dive into all of your suppliers because they don't need like a cybersecurity assessment. you still need some component of a supply chain
Yeah.
assessment, because that's really what this is getting into is nth party risk. You need to be able to see when a downstream supplier is going to impact your upstream ability to provide services to your organizations, to your customers. So that's really what it's getting into. We want to see that you're looking into your suppliers. You know what risk they could bring to your organization, and you're assessing that on a somewhat consistent basis so that you can see where there's trends. Maybe you have a trend with a supplier that you've been working with for a really long time, but suddenly they're going downhill. Do I need to look at replacing them before something happens and now I'm not able to meet my customer contracts, and therefore it's impacting my customer's customer?
That's spot on. I think that's great tips. That's what I think a lot of when you think about just business as a whole, you have to take some risks in different spots and you need to make a decision. And that's what you do every day. You think every day in regards to your organization about whether we should take this risk or not. I'd love to hear from you because you've been doing this for a long time and you're quite the expert in this third party risk side. Is this a growing industry? Are you seeing specific trends? Are regulations driving this forward? Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that front.
Absolutely growing industry. I would say even 15, 20 years ago, it really was unheard of. And now today it's almost a commonplace thing to talk about anymore. So absolutely growing. Regulations are always expanding in these areas, but also just the growth in this space and the aspects that it looks at is growing faster than even our regulators can keep up with. So there's so many areas that need to be expanded upon and built upon that I can't see third-party risk slowing down anytime soon.
Right. Ashley, I think we're going to go to some questions, and I have a couple more things to ask Falicia, but I think at this point, because we're getting some questions in here, do you mind jumping in? That'd be great.
No problem at all. So we have 7 questions so far and more coming. I'll go in order. So one question from Christopher is, are CMMC levels defined yet? That just happened to come up on the top. I don't know if that's relevant to this conversation, but are CMMC levels defined yet?
Cyber maturity model level?
Yeah, right.
Is that what?
The DoD.
I think that's what we were talking about at the time that came in.
Framework.
Yes, I can't say that I've seen anything new come across my desk today, but Rob, I'll defer that to you.
I think it's a good question. That framework is still in process. Everybody was running the 800-171 before. Now they're moving to CMMC. They've been trying to do that a few times. I don't think you guys are DoD contractors. Maybe you are. I don't know. You might be impacted in that. I think it'd be a good webinar for us to get deeper on. Let's go to the next question for Falicia.
Yes. What are the different types of cybersecurity assessments from Gilbert? And then it does follow up from Christopher again. If yes, how does one find an assessor? So it looks like maybe a little more information on assessments and how to find an assessment and whether or not we need an assessment. People seem hungry for that.
Okay. I apologize. That is not my bread and butter. So I would have to defer the information for that piece of it to you all. So third-party risk, generally I can answer, but specific into cybersecurity, I rely on my colleagues in those areas, the subject matter experts. If you're a great third-party practitioner, you will rely on your colleagues.
Those. Yeah, for sure. There is another question from Mackenzie, curious on people's thoughts on sharing documentation versus sending documentation. If not sending documentation is a red flag. If not sending documentation is a red flag, is sharing via a call to verify viable?
That's a good question.
That is a great question. And so it's really dependent on the organization and what they'll accept. I can tell you there needs to be flexibility in assessments. And so for us, absolutely. If we don't see a document come in to support it, we'll call you and say, hey, can you just do a screen share with us? And then we'll assume that our auditor was doing the right thing and then documenting that properly. But yes, so for us, I would say because there is the need for the ability to address it in other ways, we do open it up for screen shares.
That's a great question because you're asking for all types of sensitive documents people's cybersecurity posture. What do they have in place? What kind of firewall? What version? This, that. Like, it's so deep that by providing that information to somebody else, they do put themselves at risk, in a sense that if you guys have a breach with all that data, it puts them at risk too in that supply chain. So I think that's great that you're flexible and you're open to different approaches to it, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Ashley, any other questions, or you have another one?
Yeah, I'll do one more. So there's a couple folks that are asking about the SOC 2 and if that's enough of a like cybersecurity assessment model, or if they should expand. There is some conversation in the chat where folks have sort of helped each other and educated each other, which I love. But I'm just curious, can you talk a little bit about that and if that's enough for a company?
Yes. So a SOC 2 Type 2 is really a very robust report. They go really into detail of the different controls that an organization has and will identify if there is any kind of issues with those controls. And it goes into the management response to those controls. So it really gives a full kind of conversation about what the control state is, what they align to, so where it covers for that organization, and then where there's gaps and what the organization has done to meet those. So yes, a SOC 2 Type 2 is a really good one to hold and to answer to a lot of that. For my organization, the way we built our program, that's acceptable. That's something that we would prefer to receive, but a lot of organizations are still in a more of a trust verify, and they're utilizing questionnaires. So that will also kind of show you the maturity of the organization that is assessing you as well, kind of what type of tools they're using to assess you. So yes, SOC 2 Type 2, in short, is a fantastic document. Another set of documents, if you can get certified in ISO against those various controls, those are good ones to have as well. And there's many out there that will certify against your various controls. So you need to look at what control space you have and what aligns to it. So that's really why you have to go out and look at the different frameworks out there and what best aligns to your organization and what you expect your controls to be, and build to that.
That's great. Ashley, is there another question there?
There's all Defendify questions at this point. So I just want to let folks know that we're using this as an educational tool, and we'll kind of get you the Defendify questions separately. And then if somebody has several Defendify specific questions on how Defendify works and the platform, we love talking about it because we love it so much. We'll connect you with someone that will talk just basic to your questions. And so that way, folks who are maybe customers here and know how the program works don't have to listen to the Defendify inner working questions. So I'll skip those, but I'll follow up in the chat with those people.
That's great. Falicia, I got a question for you around getting into this industry. So some people in security kind of fall into it. Cybersecurity professionals sometimes fall into it too, or if they're technical, they might go to school and learn cybersecurity. I think it'd be interesting to learn a little bit. How does someone get into a career path like you followed here? Like, if they wanted to get into this space, they found it really interesting. Like, how do they get a job doing something like that?
So, I mean, for me, I fell into it, which I think a lot of people around the term that I've put in kind of fell into it. The time around what I've put in. Past that, it's really having some kind of experience in any kind of realm of compliance or information security. If you can get your foot in the door in that space, or get a certification. So go out and educate yourself. That's usually how you can get started. I stumbled upon and got a certification, and somebody saw my certification and said, "Hey, let's give you a try." And that's really how I fell into this. And I think that's how a lot of people did. They just kind of got handed a portfolio and said, "Hey, can you help us? We don't have enough people to manage suppliers right now. Can you help look at these?" And then they started working on it, and over the course of time, just it became something that they really enjoyed and loved, because I can be honest in the fact that every day is different. Third party risk is exciting and changing all of the time. It's never boring. I'm learning something every single day, and that's why I've stuck with it for 8 years.
Yeah.
Just kind of falling into it, and you stick with it. So I know a lot of people have just fallen into it, and because of how changing it is and how interesting it is, they stick with it. So
What's the certification?
really,
What's the certification you got, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah. I actually hold a few of them. So I have I'm going to give you the acronyms. Certified, it's CTPRP. So that one I think is through Shared Assessments. Certified Third Party Practitioner, I want to say is that one. And then the CRVPM is through the Compliance Institute. And that one is the Certified Vendor Manager.
Yeah.
I have to look up the certification exactly to be what that one is. But both fantastic programs if you're looking to get started. There's others out there, but both of those were really, really great to get me started because they give you the in-depth knowledge that you would need in order to actually do the assessments and build a program and create governance.
Yeah, I'll share with the people who are on here, the people I've spoken to who are in this industry, there is a huge need. There's a massive need for people to join the workforce. There's huge gaps. They're trying to hire left, right, and center. They're recruiting heavily to get people to come into this space. These larger companies, their teams are growing because it's so important to do third-party risk assessments. And then even coming down, maybe not so much in large enterprise, but even just coming down, they're recognizing that they need people on staff as well to help here. So it's a great career path. And if you're interested in, I think that something you could look at for sure.
Yes,
All right.
I can tell you hiring has been very challenging to get people that have the experience. For the most part, you're looking at people that have, like I said, compliance or information security experience that they're already risk mindseted. So you can just expand upon that rather than completely recreate the wheel. But as time goes on, I'm hoping to see that there's more education courses out there as far as college degrees and whatnot in this space, because we definitely need those parties out there.
Yeah, I think if someone has experience in IT or cybersecurity, this is a path that they could follow as well. They have
Absolutely.
they have some experience understanding how these systems work. So that's exciting. All right. I'd like to ask of you to give 3 tips to companies who are really trying to improve their third-party cybersecurity or their third-party assessments and so on. Any tips that you have? 3 tips, if you could help us with that. And then we're going to go back to getting some questions from the attendees here.
Okay, sure. So start small and build smart. Design your program to be forward thinking so that you can capture data to support the maturing of your program. So you really need data is where it is, and you need to know how to gather that data. So really in the design, think about what you'll need that to look like in the forward years, what kind of questions you need to ask and be able to answer to. So definitely keep an eye on the emerging risks that are coming down the line. So hot topics right now, AI and regulatory changes. Those are always hot topics right now. Those are the types of things that you want to keep a focus on as you're designing your program. Begin with your critical suppliers. I keep harping on that, but that's really where you need to make sure that you have everything buttoned up. Don't wait to document your process. I stated that before. Document as you go, because that shows that you have something in place. And then, like I stated before, create that 3 to 5 year roadmap, showing that you have a strategy to expand your program. Because when you have somebody coming in to audit you, that will help give them a purview to show, we've thought about this. We have an answer to this. We just haven't had it implemented just yet. We're working towards it. Next is leverage your colleagues. Like I stated before, cybersecurity is not my specific bread and butter. I'm looking at more higher level risks. But if you leverage your colleagues, you're going to get that insight that you need in order to build your program and build your assessments properly. You can leverage them to step in and help you give guidance on your policies. Sometimes you can even have them look at the specific responses that you've received and give guidance on whether that is acceptable for your organization or what maybe that remediation might need to look like. So certainly utilize your colleagues because they'll help you in so many ways. And then don't be afraid to reach out to the party that's assessing you, because they'll really help build that partnership with you and help you grow and help them understand where you have controls in place and what they need to do to put mitigating controls in place. So don't be afraid to have that conversation with them.
That's great. All right, back over to Ashley. Do you have any more questions there that we need to address?
Let's see. What access control mechanisms are or could be in place to prevent unauthorized access to sensitive information?
Technical question.
That is a technical question. Okay. I can skip it and get back to them, of course.
Whoever posts that in there, I'd highly recommend they have a set up a demo of Defendify and meet with one of our cybersecurity advisors for sure.
All right, I'll send that. That was Alex. So Alex, if you're still here, that's a great technical question for our Defendify folks. How do you consolidate results of risk assessments, and how do you revisit third parties to reassess and determine any new risk exposures? That's from Mark.
That's a really good question, Mark. Thank you. So we, like I stated, we have an inherent risk profile that we ask a bunch of questions, and we have a tool that automatically calculates that inherent risk. Behind the scenes, we're looking at the controls of that supplier, and we're documenting those controls, and we have residual risk. So we know truly what controls are in place. We know that there's probably a little less risk for that supplier, and that's what ultimately drives our reassessment cadences. So what we're doing is when we have a higher risky scored supplier ongoing, we're reviewing that on a more frequent basis. So those are getting touched at least annually. Additionally, we have continuous monitoring. So you want to have continuous monitoring for different risk areas. Specifically, we do negative news monitoring for our suppliers. So we're getting all of those negative feeds to let us know what's going on with that supplier. It tells us about mergers and acquisitions as well. We're looking at our financial posture of our suppliers. So is there any downward turns in their payments? Are they experiencing anything that might be causing them to go towards bankruptcy? And then the security monitoring. So we're looking at those public domains. Is there some kind of change in those postures, right? So does our scores go down? And so if there's anything significant that happens in those monitoring spaces as well, it might change our review timing as well. So we have a cadence that we set based off of their residual scoring, but if there's something that comes in within the continuous monitoring, that might change or adjust how we look at the supplier or the frequency for which we do. So example is an event, a major event that occurs and impacts everybody. We're going to start looking and asking questions of that supplier, doing a business impact assessment, really understanding what controls were broken, where there might have been a gap in the control, and we're documenting all of that so that the next time it comes around, we can check in and say, hey, was this closed? How did it get remediated? Tell us the story.
I'm really glad you shared that. There's some significant technology that's running in the background here that's helping you all assess your vendors beyond just questionnaires and so on. So like if you're monitoring all that, how do you react to that? Is it virtually real time? Like you're getting risk scores, you'll be alerted if something's going off track with it. Like the cybersecurity continuous monitoring, will you alert to that and reach out to the vendor and say, hey, we've just got something popped up over here? Yeah.
So we predominantly manage those internally first, but yes, if it's egregious enough, we'll have the business reach out and ask some more questions around those. So why did this score down? So for example, a lot of people use like security scorecard as an example of a monitoring service, right? So if the security scorecard score went down, it gives you a report at the back end of why that score went down, what is open, and you can go to your supplier and say, answer to this, what happened. A lot of times it's noise, but it does help guide the conversation and open the conversations so you can really truly say, okay, this is what happened. It was or was not that big of a deal. It's been remediated. This is what we did to close it.
That's great. You guys are all doing an excellent job. What else there, Ashley? Any other questions?
I'm looking in the chat and just wanted to make sure the questions here are related to you and not earlier questions. So I have a Mark, which tool are you using to support the enterprise's risk profile? That sounds like a technical question to me. And then Mark asked.
Well, that's the question around what platform you guys are using. I don't know if you want to disclose that or not. I understand if you don't, but there are.
Sure. There are lots of GRC tools. Right. Sure. There's lots of GRC tools out there that you can utilize. So you can utilize things like, trying to think, I think Dow Jones has a product, OneSource has products, RSA has products. There's Audit Board. There's so many out there. You just need to choose the right platform for you. So really, it's a workflow management tool that has the components to be able to hold any kind of like a risk register behind it. And I would look for something that you can build for your needs. So if you can manipulate the questions and build for that piece of it, that's really essentially what you need. But there's so many platforms out there that do support this. Additionally, you can outsource the whole process if you needed to. You'll see, and that's where you get some of those external questionnaires coming. So those links, you'll see things from like prevalence and process unities, where they're just sending you a link to complete an assessment. Those assessments are, like I stated, are based off of those Excel questionnaires that you usually receive. They're just in a platform format and might have slight variances to them. But programs are utilizing the back end of that to inform what's going on. So there's components to that might be able to collect the risk scoring, collect the gaps, and be able to inform them. So it just depends on what your needs are, what your resources are, and just choosing the right framework and platform to support it.
Right. It's a GRC platform that you'd be looking for. And just to sort of give everybody a little bit more insight on it, they're very complex and they're not easy to deploy. So unless you have a team there to really take care of it, it can be a lot. But search GRC platforms, check them out. Sorry, Ashley, go ahead.
No, that's great. I write down my own things from these conversations to make sure I'm educated. So thank you, Falicia and Rob, both of you. Gilbert asked, what happens to data after a vendor agreement sort of ends? I did ask if he meant like a vendor, like Defendify, what happens with Defendify, but he said no, partnership with Defendify. And if possible, can you touch on what happens to the data if a partnership with any vendor in the business? So what happens?
Good third-party management program overall. So we are the assessment arm, but I can touch on this just as a practitioner in third-party risk. You need to have a good termination process. You need to have connections with all the parties that would need to terminate that engagement. So does there have association with your technology that has components that need to be turned off? You need to have a checklist that goes with your IT team that says, yes, these have been turned off. Is there data that needs to be returned or destroyed? You need to have a checklist with those teams that says, yes, we've turned the access off, we've destroyed the data, here's the certification for that. You need to terminate the contracts and the invoicing systems and all of those things. So you need to have a checklist. It's really coming down to a checklist for terminations and making sure that you reach out to each of those individuals within your organization to make sure that those are closed out. And then documenting that at the end to show, okay, yes, we went to everybody, everything got closed out. We closed out our end of it. We documented why it got closed out, because that's also important and something that you need to think about for the future build of your program. So we have a with cause, without cause rationale behind our terminations so that we can document there was a reason we had an issue with the supplier. We may not ever want to use the supplier again because of all the issues that we had. We're going to document all of that in there with the checklist and say, okay, it's been closed out. If anybody ever wants to reopen this relationship, here's all the information. Here's the people that you go to.
Great.
That's really helpful. And then Derek asks, how far has AI been utilized in cybersecurity tools? That's a pretty heavy question, but I don't know if you want to just drop in a quick answer. How exactly far have you used AI?
It's ever expanding. It's like the Wild West right now with AI, and in my opinion. So definitely something you want to get a handle on, something that you want to create some kind of framework and guidance around for your organization. And that might not be your role, but you want to connect with those people to understand how they're monitoring the usage of AI, what your organization's stance is on the usage of AI, and then being able to identify all those tools out there that are getting supported by AI, right? And how they're being supported, what type of data that is going through them. So AI, like I said, is a huge hot topic right now. But you gotta utilize, like I said, your colleagues and your experts in your organization to help inform you on the questions that you need to cover and what is truly a risk to your organization. it's largely being utilized everywhere from what I can see right now. It's just kind of being snuck in a lot of ways. Look at your marketing teams. They're definitely using it.
So much great information. This is awesome.
Awesome.
Ashley, should we dive into the prizes now?
Yes, I chose 5 people at random and I just checked to see if they were all online, and they are. So I do want to say that one user did remind us to sign an NDA with anyone you share data with on an assessment. These webinars create some community over here in the chat. So folks have been really helping each other. I hope you get a chance to look at the chat presenters after you're done presenting, because it's really nice how everyone helps each other here. And helping each other with a $100 Visa gift card right now is going to happen. So 5 names, Ariana, Heidi, Natalie, Mark, and Keith. I'm going to share the email addresses in case there's, maybe 2 people with that name, so I get it right. It's right here. If you are here and you're still on this webinar, we are going to give you these folks $100 as a thank you for joining us today. So those are the email addresses that we'll use unless you tell me otherwise. Oh, it looks like Keith found out he won. Heidi found out she won. Great. Awesome. So excited. Glad to have you here.
Falicia, this was awesome. I think it really gave everyone a better perspective of what's happening behind the scenes and why cyber assessments are coming, and giving some people some tips on what they can do on their side. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I really love giving the insight where I can and helping support people. So this pleasure was all mine. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. We'll see you at the next one. Do we have the next one planned so we can throw it out in people's calendars? I know we do. I don't have it on the top of my head, so I'm just throwing it out in case somebody sends me a chat with the next date, but I don't see it. So we'll be sending that via email to everybody, and we're excited to see you at the next webinar. Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, Falicia. We'll see you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Ashley. Take care.
Yo.